They're your pipes, not our problem. That's what she said while standing on my driveway, clipboard tight in her hand, smiling like she'd already won. Water was already creeping across the street behind her, slow but angry. I pointed at the drain. I'd been warning them about 4 months. Cracked. Clogged. 1 heavy rain away from disaster. She laughed, tapped her paper, and slapped a bright red HOA notice on my door anyway. Fix your illegal drain or face fines, she said. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stepped back as the sky went dark and the first hard drops hit the pavement. 10 minutes later, the street turned into a shallow river. Karen's smile faded when water rushed past her, heels and straight toward the row of houses she loved to control. She yelled for someone to call the city, then snapped at me like this was my fault. I looked at the drain again. Still blocked, just like I warned them. I pulled out my phone, started recording, and said quietly, I told you this would happen. Behind her, neighbors ran with pumps and hoses, slipping in the water. A police cruiser rolled up, lights flashing, but not for me. Karen turned, pale as the officer asked who. Ignored the drainage report filed. 3 times this year. She tried to point at me again, but the water kept rising. And something in her eyes said she finally realized this wasn't going the way she planned. And the rain. It was just getting started. Karen started talking fast, waving her papers like they were magic. She told the officer I caused the flooding by messing with HOA property. I stayed quiet and kept recording. Water was now inside her favorite model home across the street. She didn't even look at it. She just kept pushing her story, louder each second. The officer asked her one simple question. Do you have proof? She froze for half a second, then pulled out a folder and handed him a printed HOA warning with my name on it. She smiled again, like the game was over. The officer turned to me and asked if I had anything to say. I unlocked my phone and showed him the city emails. Timestamps, photos, reports, all ignored. Karen stepped closer and whispered, delete that, or you'll regret it. That's when the first house alarm went off. Then another. Water was pouring into garages, floating trash cans, soaking brand new carpets. Neighbors started shouting her name, not mine. One man yelled, you said this drain was fine. She snapped back, blaming the rain, blaming me, blaming everyone. The officer looked at her again, slower this time, and asked who approved the fines and warnings. She said, I did. I'm HOA president. He nodded, then said, that's interesting. Because at that exact moment, a county truck pulled up behind the cruiser, and the man who stepped out wasn't smiling at all. The man from the county walked straight through the water like he didn't care about getting wet. He looked at the drain, then at Karen, then at me. He asked, who told you to ignore this report? Karen crossed her arms and said, it's private property. HOA handles it. He shook his head and pulled out a tablet. He showed her a map. Red lines. Blue marks. Big bold text. He said the drain was not HOA land. It was county drainage land. That meant they had no right to touch it. And no right to block repairs. Karen laughed at first and said he was wrong. Then he zoomed in and showed her signature on a rejection form from last month. Her face went white. She tried to say it was just paperwork. He said, this paperwork stopped a legal fix that could have saved these homes. Water was now knee-high in her favorite street. A woman came running out of her house crying, holding a wet photo album. A kid was shouting about his bedroom flooding. Everyone looked at Karen. Nobody looked at me anymore. The officer turned to me and asked how I knew this would happen. I said, because I used to build drainage systems for the army. We studied flood disasters. Karen looked at me like she just realized she picked the wrong person to fight. Then I opened my truck and pulled out a thick folder. On the front it said, Approved Emergency Drainage Plan, County pre-signed. And that's when Karen whispered, you can't do that. Karen laughed again, sharp and nervous. That's fake, she said, pointing at the paper in my hand. He rents. I checked. I unfolded it slowly so everyone could see. The county man leaned in first. His face changed. The officer noticed and stepped closer. "This shows an easement," the county man said, tapping the page, "and full maintenance rights." I nodded. My father bought this land before the HOA even existed. That drain runs through my property. You blocked my repair crew. You threatened fines to stop me. Karen shook her head hard. "That's not possible. HOA owns everything past the sidewalk." The county man didn't even look at her. "Not here." Water pushed into another house behind her. Someone screamed from a porch. Karen turned, panic all over her face now. She tried to switch her tone, softer, sweeter. "Okay, maybe we made a mistake. We can talk this out." The officer asked her if she filed a report saying I caused the flood. She said yes. He asked if she knew filing a false report during an emergency was serious. She went quiet. That's when the county man added something that made the air go cold. "You didn't just ignore warnings," he said. "You ordered this drain sealed. That's on record." Karen whispered, "I was protecting the neighborhood." I looked at the water swallowing her street and said, "No, you were protecting control." And then the officer reached for his radio. The officer stepped aside and spoke into his radio, calm but firm. Karen stood there, soaked now, arms tied around her clipboard like it could save her. Neighbors were filming from windows and porches. No one was on her side anymore. She suddenly turned to me and shouted, "You did this on purpose." I didn't raise my voice. I tried to stop it. The county man explained how blocking a public drain could turn into a criminal issue if homes were damaged. Karen's eyes darted around like she was looking for an exit, but the water made sure there wasn't one. A second cruiser arrived, then a third. She tried one last move. She leaned close to the officer and said, "My husband works in law enforcement." The officer looked at her badge pin, then said, "So does mine." That line hit the crowd hard. Someone actually clapped. Karen's hands started shaking. The officer asked her to step back and place the clipboard down. She refused. He repeated it, slower. I kept recording as he gently took the clipboard from her hands. He said, "You're being detained while we sort this out." She started crying, loud and messy, blaming me again, blaming the rain, blaming everyone. Behind her, water was pouring into the HOA office she ran so proudly. As they walked her toward the cruiser, she screamed, "This isn't over." I looked at the flooded street and thought, it already was. They put her in the back of the cruiser while neighbors stood in silence, water still rushing past their feet. The rain finally slowed, but the damage was done. Doors were swollen, cars half underwater, and the smell of wet drywall filled the air. An hour later, the real cleanup began. Insurance adjusters showed up. City crews arrived with heavy equipment. The county man came back to me and said, "You saved us months of worse damage." He shook my hand and asked why I didn't push harder. I looked at the street and said, "I did." She just didn't listen. That's when another twist hit. One of the officers walked over and told me Karen had been using HOA funds to pay a private contractor to block the drain, without permits. Every fine she gave me helped cover it. Neighbors overheard that part. The anger shifted fast. This wasn't a mistake anymore. People started asking questions, loud ones. How many other things did she hide? How many warnings did she ignore? Someone pulled up HOA meeting videos showing her cutting off anyone who mentioned drainage. The crowd watched it together, right there in the rain. I stood back with my family, finally safe. My kid squeezed my hand and said, "You were right." I smiled, but I wasn't celebrating yet, because the officer came back one more time and said, "There's something else you should know about that land." He lowered his voice and pointed past the flooded houses, toward the edge of the street where the water flowed out clean and fast. "That land your drain runs through," he said. "It's marked for a county protection project." I frowned. "What kind of project?" He looked at me and said, "The kind that means no HOA can ever touch it again." Turns out the county had already planned to take over long-term control of that drainage line because it protected 3 neighborhoods, not just ours. Karen knew. She saw the notice months ago and tried to rush control before it became official. That's why she pushed so hard. That's why she fined me. She wanted power before it was gone. When the neighbors heard that, something snapped. People who never spoke up before started talking all at once. One man said she threatened him over a fence. Another woman said her complaints vanished every time. The story got bigger than water. Bigger than me. The officer told us Karen would be charged for false reports, misuse of funds, and blocking county infrastructure. Civil cases were already coming. The HOA board? They resigned by morning. As the sun came out, the water slowly pulled back, leaving mud, silence, and truth behind. I stood on my driveway, phone finally down, and said the one thing that kept echoing in my head. Land doesn't lie. People do. And that's when a neighbor asked me something I didn't expect at all. So, are you running the HOA now? I laughed and shook my head. No chance. People smiled for the first time all day. The tension broke. By the next week, the county took full control of the drainage line. Big orange signs went up. HOA authority ended right at my sidewalk. Repairs started fast, real ones this time. No shortcuts. No secrets. Karen never came back to the neighborhood. The news did. Cameras pointed at the flooded homes, then at the blocked drain, then at the paperwork with her signature on it. The story spread fast. Not about rain, but about control. One reporter asked me why I fought so hard. I looked at my house, my family, and the land under my feet. I didn't buy this place to ask permission to protect it, I said. Now when it rains, the water flows where it should. Kids ride bikes again. Neighbors wave instead of whisper. The HOA office sits empty, lights off, sign taken down. Sometimes I still hear her voice in my head, laughing, saying it wasn't her problem. But every time the storm drains clear and the street stays dry, I'm reminded of one simple truth. You can ignore warnings. You can abuse power. But water always finds the truth. Months later, a storm hit harder than the one everyone remembered. Thunder shook the windows. Rain poured like it wanted revenge. Neighbors texted each other, nervous. I stepped outside anyway and watched the water rush into the rebuilt drain. Clean, fast, controlled. Not a single driveway flooded. A man down the street said quietly, "She almost ruined all of this." I replied, "No. She showed us who really mattered." The camera crews never came back, but peace did. Property values went up. Complaints went down. And every time someone new moves in, they hear the story. Not about Karen. Not about the HOA. But about the day power laughed at a warning. And water answered back. Just when I thought it was finally over, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No logo. No return address. Just a thick envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. I opened it carefully. Inside was a notice from a law firm claiming the HOA had hired them to contest the county's takeover of the drainage line. I froze. My neighbors peeked over the fence. "Not again," one muttered. But as I read the details, I realized something. They were threatening lawsuits, fines, and delays, but the documents were outdated. County records had already been updated months ago, making every claim they had completely invalid. Every signature, every threatened action, legally worthless. I smirked, put the letter down, and stepped outside. The sun was shining on the dry street. Kids were playing, neighbors waved. The water flowed perfectly through the drains I had fought to protect. I looked up at the empty HOA office and whispered, "You tried, and failed, twice." And somewhere, in the back of my mind, I knew the story would keep circulating. A warning for anyone who thought they could abuse power. Because the land, the law, and truth always catch up. End the story.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing HOA stories.